Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
Over a 5-year period, GSA's Public Building Service obligated more than $100 million for building studies. But a new Inspector General audit finds the agency lacked a consistent way to track those studies or whether their recommendations actually informed decisions. We'll break down what the audit examined, what it found, and what GSA has been asked to fix with Michelle Westrup and Brian Gibson from the GSA Office of the Inspector General. Ms. Westrup and Mr. Gibson, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Ms. Westrup, I'd like to start with you. You just did an audit on GSA's public building services and how they manage the building studies that they commission across the federal real property portfolio. Before we dig into your findings, can you first tell us what these building studies are and what they're supposed to do?
Sure, absolutely. So PBS, or GSA's Public Building Service, hires consultants to conduct building studies to determine the condition of buildings, evaluate options for possible building improvements, and provide information for specific project guidance. Building studies fill a critical need for PBS's management and oversight of its real property portfolio. PBS, once these studies take place, PBS then uses these studies to inform management decisions about all types of things: acquiring, renovating, operating, and maintaining all of the buildings in their portfolio.
You looked at a 5-year period, 2019 to 2024, and over that time frame, PBS spent more than $133 million for these building studies. As you looked into it, what did you find about how consistently those studies were tracked and monitored?
Sure. We found that PBS wasn't comprehensively tracking or monitoring these building studies. One of the first steps we took in the audit was to request even just a list of all the studies that were performed at GSA-owned buildings during that 5-year audit period. And PBS management could not provide us with a reliable list. The Office of Portfolio Management, which is one of PBS's branches, provided us with a list that they compiled, but they had to pull that list from multiple data sources. Even with them doing that, we could not verify the reliability of that list. When we analyzed that list that they provided, a lack of naming conventions kept us from verifying its reliability. We also found that the data potentially included duplicate information and was also incomplete at the same time. So, for instance, we were able to find some studies that were performed at GSA buildings and included in a PBS system that we found, but they were not included on the list that was provided to us by PBS management. So we concluded that improvements could and should be made to assist PBS in better managing its real estate portfolio.
That seems like just the tip of the iceberg there. Mr. Gibson, let me go to you. You found that PBS lacked complete and reliable data, not just on the studies that were conducted, as Ms. Westrup said, but also on whether recommendations were acted on. So what does that gap mean for decision-making inside the Public Building Service?
Sure. Well, quality information is critical for decision-making. It's not just a principle of internal control that we auditors like to expand on, but it's common sense. You make better decisions when you have better information. So without complete, accurate, and reliable information on its studies, PBS may not be able to make the best decisions on its programs and assets, and this could prevent PBS from effectively and efficiently carrying out its mission and ultimately place taxpayer dollars at risk. So, for example, for portfolio management, this could hamper decisions related to the strategic direction for PBS's assets and lead to inadequate policies on the rent PBS charges to its tenant agencies. For facilities management, the other component we discuss in the report, it could undermine their ability to meet their mission of delivering safe, reliable, and productive workplaces at the best value for the taxpayer.
You spoke in some generalities there, but I want to ask you something specific. The Public Building Service has made no secret of its intent to sell or offload a number of government-owned buildings. How is it or is it not using these building studies and the data that they would provide to value that portfolio and decide which ones are the most beneficial to sell, and at what price?
Sure. Well, these building studies are used, they're a critical component of the deferred maintenance, that figure that PBS reports on an annual basis. And so if you don't have accurate and reliable information on these studies, you might be missing some of those deferred maintenance costs that would be factored into decisions on disposing of assets. It's no secret that they have a significant deferred maintenance backlog, but is it the right number? Do they know exactly what building has what deferred maintenance liability, so they can target that building appropriately for disposal?
I'm speaking with Michelle Westrup. She's the Regional Inspector General for Auditing, and Brian Gibson is the Deputy Assistant Inspector General for Real Property Audits. Both are from the GSA Office of the Inspector General. Ms. Westrup, let's come back to you. The report points out that building studies are federal records, subject to the Federal Records Act and GSA retention policies. How well was PBS positioned to locate and preserve these records when your team requested them?
As referred to earlier, they were not well positioned really at all. They really hadn't set themselves up for success in this area. The Office of Portfolio Management does have a policy that requires its staff to upload completed building studies into a system that they have called the Building Assessment Tool, or BAT. However, during our audit, we tested that and found that not all building studies were even uploaded into that system. To get down into the nitty-gritty, we selected a sample of 158 building studies across 48 different buildings to see if they were uploaded into this system. And we found that PBS only uploaded 31 or 20% of those 158 building studies of our sample. And then the flip side of that, the other portfolio that Brian referred to earlier, PBS's Office of Facilities Management, they were unable to provide us even a listing of studies that we could rely upon for any further testing. They couldn't provide us with any guidance on how they use the building studies or requirements such as this system for tracking and monitoring them. So they really had a lot of room for improvement.
So is that a process problem? Do they just not have the processes and oversight in place? Is it a systems problem? The system doesn't do a good job tracking all of this, or is it some combination of all of that?
I would say it's more of a process, policy, and oversight. Process meaning they need the processes in place to track and monitor them. And then they need policies to require that the employees and the staff fulfill whatever those requirements are to track them, to put them into a system. And then that third piece is the oversight. Then some manager, some supervisor, some oversight entity needs to come in and ensure that that's being done consistently.
Mr. Gibson, let me come back to you. PBS is in the middle of a broader reorganization. They're centralizing their structure. They have lost staff as a result of some of the reorganizations over the past year. How does this shortcoming in the tracking and data that you all identified make that transition more complicated?
Sure. Well, the issues certainly make it harder for PBS to have a comprehensive picture of the needs and problems facing its portfolio. But we kind of see this as an opportunity for PBS. One of the things we note in the report is that under its new centralized structure, PBS will need complete, accurate, and reliable information about all aspects of its operations, including building studies, to effectively and efficiently allocate resources to its nationwide portfolio of buildings. These resources obviously include staffing. With fewer personnel and a centralized structure, PBS needs good information to assign the staff to priority areas. And if managed properly, building studies can be an excellent source of this information. So we think if PBS improves its means of tracking and monitoring these studies, it can more efficiently leverage the valuable information the studies provide to address problems, improve operations, and drive decisions about its portfolio.
One of the management topics in this space that you mentioned a little bit earlier was the maintenance backlog. In recent congressional testimony, there was a range given to that between $25 and $50 billion. There's a lot of zeros there. But if we can't decide whether it's 25 or 50 billion, how could PBS possibly prioritize that work?
Sure. Well, whether it's 26 billion or 50 billion, it's a big number. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that space. But certainly looking at the building studies, capturing the results of those studies, assessing them, and being able to track what those studies say can really help inform PBS decisions, as I mentioned earlier. Again, they use these studies to come up with this deferred maintenance figure. It can help them have more accurate and reliable information on the buildings that they're looking to dispose and really drive decisions about which ones they should prioritize.
So, Ms. Westrup, let me come back to you then. The report makes some very specific recommendations. Walk us through those and maybe where you're seeing progress.
Sure. So our first recommendation, this kind of goes back to what we were talking to earlier, is the process recommendation, right? So it's for PBS to develop and implement a method to track and monitor building studies. One, just a method to track them, and then ensure that they can retrieve them efficiently, effectively, quickly, if they need to make quick on-the-fly decisions, calculated decisions, whatever management decisions they need to make. So that's our process recommendation is the first one. And then the second recommendation really goes more to policy, is to develop and implement policies to ensure that the study data is accurate, complete, reliable. Second, of course, in the heart of everything that we do, to ensure that we're not wasting taxpayer dollars on unnecessary studies, duplicative studies, studies that have been done and just not acted upon, that type of thing. And then third goes back to what you referred to earlier, and ensuring that the building studies are preserved in accordance with the Federal Records Act. Once those recommendations and actions are complete, then that's where the oversight would come in for PBS to ensure that it's being done on a consistent basis. And as far as where PBS is on those recommendations, they have a corrective action plan due in response to this audit and our recommendations due in early May, I believe May 5th. And so we'll learn more about their proposed actions at that time.
I've been speaking with Michelle Westrup. She's the Regional Inspector General for Auditing, and Brian Gibson, who is the Deputy Assistant General for Real Property Audits. Both are from the GSA Office of the Inspector General. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.